Former Democratic Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy of Florida and Republican strategist Brendan Buck, former advisor to House Speakers Ryan and Boehner. Thanks to all of you for being here. A lot to get to. Carol, you have been talking to your sources throughout the weekend, overnight, and you have new reporting on what the thinking is right now behind the scenes at the White House about any potential path forward for a peace deal. It doesn't look good.
No, and one of the things that we learned in our reporting is the administration officials say there have been discussions in the past 48 hours about potentially pausing aid to Ukraine. Now, it's not clear when that would happen, if the president were to make that decision, or if there's something that would need to take place that would trigger it. But the fact that that discussion is happening really underscores the level of frustration within the administration with President Zelensky. Now, from President Zelensky's perspective, he sees President Trump as leaning more closely to Russia than to Ukraine. But in talking to officials this weekend, they don't know where this goes next. They say that this was not a setup. They think it's still possible to deal with Zelensky, but as one official said, the ball is in Zelensky's court. He needs to make it right. They don't know exactly how he would do that, except to say that he needs to recognize the paradigm shift. I thought Speaker Johnson outlined a potential roadmap for President Zelensky, saying that he needed to show more gratitude, apologize, and sign this minerals deal. But, you know, where this goes from here, we don't really know. And the one thing I would add, Kristen, is that President Zelensky irritated President Biden, too. We reported in 2022, they had a phone call, and President Biden lost his temper with Zelensky, felt like he wasn't showing enough gratitude. The difference, that was in private, and support for Ukraine among Americans was pretty high, and President Biden wasn't trying to negotiate an end to the war. President Trump promised to do that. This doesn't really get him any closer.
I'm so glad you brought up that call with President Biden, Brendan, because it does speak to the fact that President Zelensky is someone who's defiant. He does not back down from these requests. There is a discussion, did he misread the room in that moment and push the request too far, get under the skin of another president? I thought it was notable. The other thing that we heard from Speaker Johnson today, a roadmap about how relations could be repaired, but also opening the door to, yes, maybe he does need to step down, something initially floated by Senator Lindsey Graham. What do you make of it?
Well, you certainly have, I think, a pretty big divide. And I think you divide it between people who have clear-eyed views about what's going on in Ukraine as it relates to Russia, and people who are more interested in keeping up with whatever Donald Trump just said the day before. And I think I would put Mike Johnson in that latter category. I think both Johnson and Langford were pretty clear, and they said some things that, frankly, the president wasn't willing to do. That Russia is the enemy here, that we want to defeat them. Frankly, what Zelensky said in the Oval Office was relatively unremarkable. He basically outlined those things, and that was so offensive to Donald Trump that we had this enormous blow-up. These two men just said the exact same thing. But we're in a situation now where we are blaming an ally, a person who is fighting for the very survival of their nation. We're piling on him because he stated the obvious, because that was too disrespectful to him. And I think we are missing the bigger point. We need a resolution to this. And I think Donald Trump's narcissism caused what happened here. But I'm hoping that Donald Trump's narcissism will actually bring us back together, because ultimately we need a resolution. I think Donald Trump probably still wants to get a deal. And so I don't think this is the end of the story.
That's the question. If he gets a deal, will all be forgiven, Stephanie? At the same time, the United States, Ukraine's allies watching very closely. President Zelensky meeting with the British Prime Minister. He's going to be holding other meetings with his European leaders. What are the broader implications as the United States allies on the world stage watch this? They've already expressed concerns. Could Russia be looking to go into other, or to neighboring NATO nations, I should say?
I think the allies and adversaries alike are looking at this, and what is crystallizing for them is what an America First foreign policy looks like. And this is abandoning decades of what has given America competitive advantage on the world stage, and that has been the strength of our alliances built on shared democratic values and shared interests. We're now trading all of that for short-term deals and relationships in which there's a transaction cost for dealing with the United States, whether you're an ally or an adversary. And so that's really shifting what people are thinking. And I think in capitals all across the world, leaders are trying to recalibrate calibrate to the new America.
Yeah, Julio, how do you think this plays out, and what are you watching for as we wait to see if these talks do get back on track?
I mean, I think the big question is this a major shift in American foreign policy, or is it President Trump doing things differently to achieve what he wants, peace in Ukraine? But the fact is that I've been able to talk to some Ukrainian refugees that I met a few years ago, and they've expressed this hopelessness and fear that they don't know what's going to happen to their country. It's basically trapped between Russia and the USA. And I feel like this uncertainty is shared by other allies. This is bigger than Ukraine. This is about American allies. Just look at Mexico or Canada. They are neighbors, trading partners, and they might be facing tariffs next week. So a lot of uncertainty in the middle of this.
Fascinating to hear from refugees and that real world impact that blow up is having. Carol, this is the backdrop as President Trump prepares to address the nation in his joint address on Tuesday night. What are you watching for Tuesday?
Well, what White House officials say is the president, unsurprisingly, is going to walk through what he sees as his accomplishments over the past 6 weeks, and including during his first term. He'll tout some of those as well, and he'll have a lot of what one official said were made-for-TV moments. But the thing that I'm looking for is, you know, President Trump told you right after he was elected that he won on the border and groceries. What does he say about those costs for Americans that they're still dealing with that he promised to bring down on day one?
Yeah, Julio, the fact that he's not going to be able to say prices have come down, the fact that he's not going to be able to say we're on the path to peace, what do you think the stakes are Tuesday night for him?
I think it's a very important night for President Trump, and I agree. He made two big promises during his campaign, right? Fight inflation, fight immigration, and so far, consumer satisfaction is dropping, consumer confidence, I mean. Inflation might be coming up, and deportations are not where he wants them to be yet. So he still has big challenges in front of him.
Higher than it was under the end of the Biden administration, but not quite where he wants it to be. Brendan, how do you see this unfolding? I anticipate he's going to tout the cuts that Elon Musk is carrying out, but it's a fine line he's got to walk there.
Yeah, we heard a lot this morning about waste, fraud, and abuse, and they're at the same time the government, the president, trying to talk about we're going to balance the budget. I'll be very interested to see how he plans to outline that. It's frankly nonsense to talk about we're going to balance the budget through waste, fraud, and abuse. So they were talking about $100 billion a year in improper payments. We had an almost $2 trillion deficit just this past year alone. And there is no waste, fraud, and abuse line item in the budget that they can just outlaw. Now, I'm all for getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, and if Elon Musk can actually find places to do it, that's fine. But there is such a disconnect by saying we're going to balance the budget and we are never going to touch Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That's just simply impossible, and I wish there would be a little more honesty about how we're going to get there. So take it with a grain of salt when they say they want to balance the budget.
Stephanie, Senator Sanders was pretty clear. He said it's not going to happen. Medicaid and other entitlements will be touched. Do you think Democrats are pushing back? Have they found their voice in this moment yet?
I think they're starting to find their voice, but what they really need to do is get out of Washington and get into their communities. I think this last election demonstrated that voters didn't feel like Democrats shared their concerns. And I'll tell you, having stood in front of town halls, your community, when you talk to the people, they'll tell you what they care about and the intensity with which they care about it, as well as how to talk about it. And I think those are all things, lessons that Democrats could really use in this moment as they try to understand what the chaos of the slash and burn of federal agencies and federal programs has on actual Americans.
Yeah, and we've been watching those town halls already start to play out. Great conversation.